Hello and welcome to Anando. In today's class, we will move on to the next question, determinants of price elasticity of demand. So with the last answer, cross demand, we have finished one part of the third unit about demand. Now the remaining questions are from the second part of the demand analysis from Unitary, that is about the elasticity of demand. So under that, the first 5 marks question from elasticity of demand is the SAQ 16. What are the basic determinants of price elasticity of demand? Okay. See, now before I explain about the determinants of price elasticity of demand, I would like to briefly explain about the concept of elasticity of demand and also what are all the various kinds of price elasticity of demand. Because without explaining those concepts, it will not be fair on my part to explain only the determinants of price elasticity of demand. Okay, so let me briefly explain about the concept of elasticity of demand and the various types of price elasticity of demand. Okay, now the concept of elasticity of demand, see, if you remember the law of demand, see, the law of demand is mentioning that if if the price of the commodity increases, the demand for the commodity decreases and vice versa. That is, the law of demand is just mentioning about the direction of the change in demand. So that is, when the price increases, the demand will decrease. When the price decreases, the demand will increase. So it's just mentioning the inverse relationship. That is only about the direction of increase or decrease, direction of change in demand for a particular commodity. But the law of demand does not say anything about how much the demand is changing because of a certain percentage change in the price of a commodity or income of the consumer or the prices of substitute goods. Okay, because every commodity or service is not the same. It varies from person to person, it varies from time to time, and it varies from place to place also. Okay, see, there are certain commodities, you can understand that there are certain commodities we will purchase whatever might be the price of that particular commodity. Okay, so like that, for example, medicines, food grains and all, there are these are all the certain types of commodities we cannot avoid purchasing. Okay, so we don't have, we don't have the choice of decreasing or increasing the quantity demanded of these kinds of commodities, even though the prices are increasing or decreasing. But there are certain other commodities we would be willing to purchase only if there is a significant decrease in the price of the commodity, or there are certain types of commodities or services which are affected mostly because of the change in price. To put it very simply, there are certain commodities or services which we have to purchase, which we will purchase even irrespective of the fact that the prices are increasing. But there are certain kinds of commodities or services we would like to purchase only when the price of the commodity or service decreases. So that means, for if the demand is not changing that much because of the change in price, then the elasticity for that commodity or service is inelastic. But if the demand is affected too much, if the demand is changing too much because of the change in price, then for that commodity it is elastic. So I put it very in an easy understanding method for you. You take two things. One is a rubber band and another one is a thread. Okay. Now, what is the difference you find between a rubber band and a thread? Rubber band, you can expand the rubber band to a maximum extent and you can contract the rubber band also, isn't it? But can you do the same thing for a thread? Thread you cannot expand or contract. So thread is like inelastic demand, in the sense that the demand cannot be increased or decreased that much. Okay, or sometimes it cannot be changed at all. So remember that if the commodity or service is having the inelastic demand, it is like a thread. Okay, on the other hand, if the commodity or service, the quantity demanded can be increased or decreased, then it is like a rubber band. That commodity or service is like having the elastic demand. So the commodities or services which are having elastic demand, it is like a rubber band. you can increase the demand or contract the demand. On the other hand, if the commodity or service that cannot be increased or decreased, whose demand cannot be increased or decreased, it is like a thread. Okay, that is inelastic demand. So if you just remember the concept of the elasticity and inelastic based on the examples of differences between thread and rubber band, you will be able to understand it clearly. Okay, now coming to, based on this, we have different kinds of elasticity of demand and different types of elasticity of demand, and what are all the factors which affect the elasticity of demand. Why for some of the commodities we cannot change the demand even though the price is increasing too much, and why, what are all the reasons for certain types of commodities we are postponing the purchase, we are decreasing the consumption, we are decreasing our demand if their prices increase. So all those things are the determinants of demand. Okay, now what is the meaning of elasticity of demand? So the percentage or proportional change in quantity demanded to a given percentage or proportional change in three variables, that is price, income or prices of related goods. So the demand for a commodity is changing because of the change in price, because of the change in income, or because of the change in prices of related commodities. Okay, so here the demand is a dependent variable. The change, the price, income and prices of related goods, they are all independent variables. So how much the percentage or proportional change in quantity demanded, that is how much, to what extent, to what degree the demand for a commodity is changing because of the degree or the percentage change in either because of price or because of income or prices of related goods, that is known as elasticity of demand. So this is the meaning of elasticity of demand. So based on that, we are having three types of elasticity of demand. So if the demand is changing because of the change in price, that is called price elasticity of demand. If the demand is changing because of the income of the consumer, price is remaining constant. Because of the income of the consumer, then it is known as income elasticity of demand. If the demand is changing because of the prices of related goods, that is substitutes and complements, then it is known as cross elasticity of demand. Just like we have three types of demand: price demand, income demand, cross demand, we also have three types of elasticity of demand, that is the price elasticity, income elasticity and cross elasticities of demand. Okay, so now first let us check out what is the price elasticity of demand. Okay, so the same meaning, percentage or proportional change in demand due to percentage or proportional change in price, only price, all the other factors remaining constant. That is, here the income of the consumer is remaining constant and the prices of related goods are also remaining constant. The demand is changing only because of the change in price of the commodity. So there is a method or formula through which we can calculate the elasticity of demand, whether the commodity or service is falling under the category of elastic demand, that is like a rubber band, or whether the commodities or service is falling under the category of inelastic demand, that is like thread. Okay, so there are two methods. The first method is percentage method. So here the formula ED represents the elasticity of demand. So ED is equal to, this is the formula, percentage change in quantity demanded divided by percentage change in price. Always remember, numerator the quantity demanded and the denominator will be the independent variables, price, income or prices of related goods, because the demand is changing because of the change in price. So numerator will always have the demand, quantity demanded, and the denominator will change according to the type of elasticity of demand. So this is very important even for the CPT students. Okay, so I just given a simple example so that the concept will be clear to you. Suppose assume that the demand for mangoes increased 10%. Okay, from the previous price the demand for mangoes increased 10%. Why it has increased? Due to a 5% fall in its price. So when the price of mangoes fell by 5%, the demand for mangoes increased 10%. Okay, what is the elasticity of demand for mangoes? We have to find out the numerical value of the elasticity of demand for mangoes. So now what is the formula? Formula, percentage change in quantity demanded divided by percentage change in price. So quantity demanded, there is a 10% change in price, isn't it? So the elasticity of demand, this is 10%. So when the price of mangoes has increased by 10%, sorry, when the price of mangoes has decreased by 5%, the quantity demanded of mangoes increased to 10%. So 10 divided by 5 is 2. Okay, so when that means what, it is elastic. So the demand for mangoes is elastic. If the elasticity of demand is more than 1, if the numerical value of the particular elasticity of demand of that particular commodity or service is 1 or more than 1, then that particular commodity or service is said to be having elastic demand. So in this case it is having 2, so demand for mangoes are elastic. That means what, if the price of mangoes decreases little, the change in demand, the quantity demanded increase will be more. So here itself you can see that the demand increased to 10%, so but the fall in price is only 5%. So the change in demand is more than change in price. So if the change in demand either increase or decrease, okay, so according to the law of demand, the demand might increase or decrease according to the changes in price. So if the change in demand is more than the change in price of the commodity or service, then it is elastic demand, like a rubber band. Okay, now if that's what it is written. Generally, if demand changes more due to a change in price, then that particular good is having elastic demand. On the other hand, if the change in demand is not much due to a change in price, then that particular good is having inelastic demand. Okay, so that is the more change in demand, like a rubber band, less change in demand, that is like a thread. Okay, the second method of calculation is the something called the proportional method. See, so every time you will not have the percentage wise. See here, if the question is, or sometimes it is possible to get the information regarding the percent. This is the percentage that the price change, and this is the percentage the demand change. But every time it will not be possible. So if it is at the most, what will know, okay, last month what was the price of mangoes, 2 days back what was the price of mangoes, and today what is the price of mangoes. So 2 days back what was the demand for the commodity, and today what is the demand for the commodity, isn't it? So we will have two prices and two demand. So old price and new price, old quantity demanded and new quantity demanded. So that is the information which is generally available. Okay, so based on that, how do you calculate the elasticity of demand? So that method is the proportional method. Okay, so the formula is ED is equal to, ED again represent elasticity of demand, proportional change in quantity demanded divided by proportional change in price. So which is equal to, so proportional change in quantity demanded, how do you calculate the proportional change in quantity demanded? That is equal to change in quantity demanded, that is delta Q. Delta Q represent the change in quantity. Change in quantity demanded, that is delta Q, divided by original quantity, that is Q, multiplied by 100. That is again divided by change in price, that is delta P. Delta represent the change, divided by original price P into 100. Okay, so if you are writing in the form of a equation, is equal to delta Q divided by Q, that is again divided by delta P divided by P. So how do you arrive? Delta Q divided by Q multiplied by inverted. So when you are putting in the numerator, then it will reverse, isn't it? So in the delta Q divided by Q multiplied by P by Q, or finally you are having the formula delta Q divided by delta P into P by Q. So remember this. This is the formula for proportional method. Delta Q divided by delta P multiplied by P by Q. Okay. So again I have given you a simple example. So we'll take the case of mangoes only. So instead of percentages, let us find out what is the numerical value of the elasticity of mangoes, given what is the how much the price and demand change. Okay, so suppose the price of mangoes is rupees 80 per kg. The quantity demanded was 2 kgs. When the price decreases to rupees 40 per kg, the quantity demanded of mangoes increases to 3 kgs. Calculate the elasticity of demand. Now what are the things we need? We need Q and P, and we need delta Q and delta P. So Q is the original quantity. So original quantity we can see here, it is the 2 kgs. Okay, so Q is equal to 2 kgs, and the price of mangoes, original price of the mangoes is 80. So P is equal to rupees 80. when the price decreases to 40 rupees, that means what? Delta P, the change in price. So from 80 rupees it has decreased to 40 rupees. So the change in price is equal to delta P, which is equal to rupees 40. How much the quantity demanded changes? From 2 kgs it has increased to 3 kgs. So the change in quantity demanded is 1 kg. So delta Q is equal to 1 kg. So what is the formula? Delta Q divided by delta P multiplied by P by Q. So delta Q is 1 by 40 multiplied by 80 by 2. So 80 by 80 or 8 by 8 is equal to 1. So this particular commodity is having the unitary elastic. This is the coefficient. This is the numerical value of elasticity. So unitary elastic, or you can generally say the demand for mangoes is again elastic. So 1 and more, if the value is 1 or more than 1, then we will say that particular commodity is having the elastic demand. Okay. So that's what. If the coefficient of elasticity is 1 and greater than 1, then the demand is said to be elastic. If the coefficient of elasticity, that is the numerical value of elasticity of demand, is lesser than 1, the demand is said to be inelastic. Okay. So this is the price elasticity of demand. Then we will move on to the income elasticity of demand. Everything is same. Only thing is, instead of price, here the demand changes because of the change in consumers' income. So what is the meaning here? So all this you will get for 2 marks. Elasticity of demand you will get for 2 marks. Price elasticity of demand you will get for 2 marks. Income elasticity, income and cross elasticity together you might get for 5 marks. Separately you might get for 2 marks. Okay. So income elasticity of demand, the percentage or proportional change in quantity demanded to a given percentage or proportional change in the income of the consumer. Other factors constant. So other factors constant means here the price of the commodity and the prices of related commodities, they both are remaining constant. So the formula will be percentage method, EY. So EY represents the income of the consumer. Y always represents, and the alphabet Y always represents income. So for income elasticity of demand, we normally write EY. So EY is equal to percentage change in quantity demanded. Always the quantity demanded will be on the numerator, divided by why the quantity demanded is changing, because of the change in income. So divided by percentage change in consumers' income. Okay, or proportional method, EY is equal to proportional change in quantity demanded divided by proportional change in consumers' income. So how do you rewrite this? Proportional change in quantity demanded, same method, same form method. Change in quantity demanded, that is delta Q, divided by original quantity Q multiplied by 100. That is again change in income, that is delta Y, divided by change in income delta Y divided by original income Y multiplied by 100. So finally what is the answer we are getting? Delta Q by delta Y into Y by Q. So this is the formula for income elasticity of demand. Okay. Now finally the third one is the cross elasticity of demand. So the cross elasticity of demand, the demand is changing because of the change in prices of related commodities. Okay. So the meaning is the percentage or proportional change in quantity demanded of good X. Okay. In response to a percentage or proportional change in the price of its related good Y. So that is substitution complement. So formula will be percentage change in quantity demanded of X divided by percentage change in price of Y, or which is equal to, that is the proportional method, change in quantity demanded of good X, that is delta QX, divided by original quantity demanded of good X, that is QX, multiplied by 100, and that is again divided by change in price of good Y, that is delta PY, divided by original price of good Y, that is PY, multiplied by 100. So finally what is we are getting? Delta QX divided by delta PY multiplied by PY by QX. Okay. So these are all the various types of elasticity of demand. I repeat again, you might get for 2 marks and together you might get for 5 marks also. Okay. Now what are all the various kinds of price elasticity of demand? It's very, very important for your 2 marks also, and you will be able to understand better the concept of elasticity. Okay. So there are different kinds of price elasticity of demand. So meaning, the same meaning, the percentage change in quantity demanded of a good due to a percentage change in its price, other factors remaining constant, that is income of the consumer and the prices of related goods, they are all remaining constant. That is known as price elasticity of demand. Okay. So the extent of change in demand due to the change in price depends on the nature of the commodity, because for some of the goods the change in demand might be more because of the change in price, either increase or decrease. Then for those goods it is elastic, that's why the response of demand is more. For some goods change in demand might be more even if there is a small change in price, because all the commodities are not the same for us, isn't it? Some of the commodities we would buy only when the price falls, but some other commodities, even in as I mentioned before, whatever might be the price we have to purchase, isn't it? So it varies from one commodity to another commodity, and also of course one person to another person, etc. So that's why there is some of the commodities is having the elastic demand, and some of the commodities it is having the inelastic demand. So for some goods, change in demand might be more even if there is a small change in price, then the demand is said to be elastic. That means for the response of demand is more. Okay, we are reacting so much because of the change in price of the commodity. If we don't react that much, then it is inelastic. For some goods, change in demand might be less due to a given change in price, then the demand is inelastic. Okay, the demand, that means what? The demand doesn't respond much to the change in price. Doesn't respond much to the change in price. It is like a thread. Demand responds to more in because of the change in price. That is like a rubber band. Okay. So based on this, we are having 5 kinds or types of price elasticity of demand. Okay. This is very extremely important for your 2 marks and also for the all the CPT students also. So we have 2 extremes. One extreme is that there is a no change in price, but there is a complete change in demand for a commodity. So that is called as the perfectly elastic demand. Okay, in a perfectly elastic or infinitely elastic demand. So what is it? A small change in price leads to infinite change in demand. A small change in price, or sometimes even without any change in price also, the demand for the commodity will change infinitely. That means for a very small fall in price, the demand increases to the extent of infinity, or a very small rise in price, the demand decreases, totally contracts to zero. See, for example, you say the different petrol bunks are there. So if one petrol bunk is selling for 110 rupees per liter, okay, but nearby, after couple of yards away, there is another petrol bunk which is selling, let us assume instead of 110 rupees, that petrol bunk is selling for, let us say, 107 rupees or 108 rupees. Now what will happen? Everyone, all the vehicle owners, they will go and have fill up the petrol only in that next petrol bunk which is selling at even though the price change is very small, instead of 110 rupees, it is 2 rupees or 3 rupees lesser also, people, all the vehicle owners, they will flock to the other petrol bank which is selling at a lesser price. That means what? And then the petrol bank which is selling at 110 rupees, totally there will not be any demand for petrol from this petrol bank. The demand totally contracts. So that means what? A very small fall in price, okay, the totally the demand for the other petrol bunk increases to infinity, but for this petrol bunk the demand totally contracts to zero. Okay, so that is the perfectly elastic demand. So the coefficient of elasticity is ED is equal to infinity. This is the numerical value of elasticity. So the diagram, if you are representing in the form of a diagram, all these are important. You have to do that in the sometimes it is asked for 10 marks also. Even if it is asked for the 2 marks also, you better understand the concept and the diagram. Okay, so now what is happening here? X-axis quantity demanded and y-axis price, and you can see that PD is the demand curve. That means what? The price is not changing at all, even without any change in price. Or I marked some points in the red dots. Even you can see whether the price is increasing a very little or whether the price is decreasing a very little. When the price increases even a small amount, that is from like 110 rupees to 107 rupees, the demand totally contracts to zero. or if the price decreases, then the demand is increasing to infinity. Or put it very simply, the price is remaining the same at OP, the demand is increasing to infinity. It can be OQ, it can be OQ1, it can be OQ2, whatever it might be. The demand contracts to the expands to the maximum. If the price increases even a little, the demand totally contracts to zero. Okay, so the demand curve will be a horizontal straight line parallel to x-axis. We all know what is the shape of the normal demand curve, but in this curve the demand curve will be a horizontal straight line parallel to x-axis. This is perfectly elastic demand. This is normally found in perfect competition. So if you remember the perfect competition, all the large number of buyers are there, isn't it? So all this large number of buyers and sellers, the sellers are selling identical commodities, if you remember that, isn't it? So one of the conditions of perfect competition is large number of sellers and buyers. So let us take the sellers. If all this large number of sellers are selling identical commodities, if one seller decreases the price, what will happen? All the consumer will go to that particular seller only, because they are getting the same commodity at a lesser price. But if one seller increases a price even a very very little also, then nobody will come to his shop, because they can go to the another shop, the same commodity they can get at a lesser price. So this kind of situation is normally found in the perfectly competitive market. So this is one extreme, and the second extreme is the perfectly inelastic demand. So perfectly inelastic demand is the demand is not changing. The price keeps on changing. Whatever might be the price of the commodity, the demand is remaining constant. So that is perfectly inelastic demand. This is another extreme. So here there will not be any change in demand even though there is a change in price. So it is also called as the zero elastic demand, as the coefficient of elasticity is equal to 0. So the diagram, if you observe the diagram, you can find that the demand is remaining constant at OQ. The price only keeps changing, P1, isn't it? P2, P3, whatever it might be, the demand will remain constant at OQ. Okay, so here ED is equal to 0, elasticity of demand is equal to 0, because delta Q is equal to 0. Delta Q is change in quantity, isn't it? So there is no change in quantity here demanded here, so delta Q is equal to 0, so ED is equal to 0. But whereas in the first case, delta P is equal to 0. Okay, so in this case delta P is equal to 0. There is no change in the price of the commodity. If the denominator is 0, it is infinity. Okay, but here the numerator is 0, so then it becomes zero elastic demand. So what is the shape of the demand curve here? The demand curve will be a vertical straight line parallel to y-axis. For perfectly elastic demand, demand curve will be a horizontal straight line parallel to x-axis. For a perfectly inelastic demand, demand curve will be a vertical straight line parallel to y-axis. Okay, so these are all the two extremes, and we have the center, middle position, that is the third one, unitary elastic demand. So unitary elastic demand, the name itself says unitary, that is coefficient is 1. So here the change in demand is equal to the change in price, that is the percentage or proportional change in demand is equal to the percentage or proportional change in price. If the price of the commodity increases by 3%, the demand for the commodity falls by 3%. If the price of the commodity decreases by 5%, the demand for the commodity increases by 5%. Both price and quantity, they change in the same proportion. Then that is called as the unitary elastic demand. So here the coefficient of elasticity is equal to 1. So you can see that unitary elastic demand, what you are observing, QQ1, that is delta Q, is equal to PP1, that is delta P. That means what? This gap Q1, this gap and P1, they both are same. Okay, so that means what? The change in the percentage or proportional change in demand is equal to the percentage or proportional change in price of the commodity. So then you will have the elasticity of demand is equal to 1, ED is equal to 1, and the shape of the demand curve will be a rectangular hyperbola. This is the shape of the demand curve. It will be in the form of a rectangular hyperbola. Okay, this is the unitary elastic demand, this is the middle one. And apart from that, we have two other types of elasticity. Fourth one, relatively elastic demand. Relatively elastic demand means the change in demand is more than the change in price. Okay, elastic means like a rubber band. Always remember that, then it will be easy for you to understand. The percentage or proportional change in demand is more than the percentage or proportional change in price. That is what, if the price of the commodity is increased by 5%, price of the commodity increased by 5%, the demand for the commodity has decreased by 8% or 10% or more than 5%. Okay, that is the change in demand is more than the change in price of the commodity. That is elastic demand or relatively elastic demand. The coefficient of elasticity ED is greater than 1. Okay, for elastic demand, the numerical value of elasticity will be greater than 1. Okay, now if you check the diagram, what you are observing, PP1, that is the change in price, that is delta P, is lesser than the change in QQ1. You can see that this gap is more, isn't it? So that is what, delta Q is greater than delta P. Okay, so QQ1, that is delta Q, is greater than PP1, that is delta P, that is change in demand is greater than change in price. So you can see the demand curve is more slanting here, and the coefficient of elasticity ED is greater than 1. Okay, that is another type. And the last one is relatively inelastic demand. So here the percentage of proportional change in demand is lesser than the percentage of proportional change in price. That is, if the price of the commodity increases by 5%, then the demand for the commodity decreases by 3% or lesser than 5%. Okay, so here the price changes more, the change in demand is lesser. So if it is lesser, then it is called as the inelastic or less elastic demand. So the coefficient of elasticity is ED is lesser than 1. So if you observe the diagram, what you are finding here, you can see that the PP1 is, that is QQ1 is lesser than PP1. QQ1, that is delta Q. So this gap is lesser than the PP1 gap, isn't it? So QQ1 delta Q is lesser than PP1 delta P. That is, the change in quantity demanded is lesser than the change in price of the commodity, and the coefficient of elasticity is lesser than 1. Okay, and you can see the demand curve is more steeper. For relatively elastic demand, the demand curve is more slanting. For relatively inelastic demand, the demand curve is more steeper. For unitary elastic demand, it can be a straight line, or it will be in the form of a rectangular hyperbola. For perfectly inelastic or zero elastic demand, the demand curve is a vertical straight line, and for perfectly elastic demand, the demand curve is a horizontal straight line parallel to x-axis. Okay, now you have understood that there are several degrees of elasticities, isn't it? For some of the commodities it is totally changing, for some of the commodities it is not changing at all, for some of the commodity it is changing more than the price, for some of the commodity it is changing lesser than the price, for some of the commodities it is changing equally to the change in price. So depending upon the nature of the commodity, depending on so many factors, the numerical value of the elasticity of demand of a particular commodity will change. Okay, so now we will go what are all the factors that determine the elasticity of demand. Why? For what type of commodities will have more change in demand is more, for what type of commodity the change in demand will be lesser. So that is the answer. Now you will be able to understand that there are different elasticities of demand for a commodity. Okay, for different commodities. Okay, moving to the main answer now. Determinants of price elasticity of demand. Okay, so SAQ 16, what are the basic determinants of price elasticity of demand? First, as usual, you have to write the meaning of elasticity of demand. The percentage or proportional change in quantity demanded due to a percentage or proportional change in price of the commodity, other factors being constant, is known as price elasticity of demand. Elasticity of demand for a good varies from person to person place to place and from time to time. The various factors that determine the price elasticity of demand are: first one, the nature of the commodity. So the nature of the commodity, some of the commodities might fall under category of necessities, some of the commodities you can group under the category of luxuries. Okay, so the elasticity of demand for necessities like food grains is inelastic, but for luxuries like gold, diamonds, etc. is more elastic. Why? What is the reason here? Necessities like food grains and medicines and all, we have to consume. We cannot say that the price has increased so much, we don't want to consume. Can we do that? It is for our survival, isn't it? So irrespective of whatever might be the price of the commodity, we have to consume certain quantities of food grains, so the demand will be the same. Just because the price of food grains have decreased, will we keep on consuming plate after plate meals? We won't. Maybe to a little extent we might increase, but then we cannot keep on increasing our consumption of food grains, isn't it? We don't have that much capacity. So whatever might be the price of the commodity, the demand almost remains the same. So it is perfectly inelastic or maybe relatively less elastic. So to be put it categorized under inelastic group. So for necessary like food grains, whatever might be the price, the demand will not change much. So that they come under the category of inelastic demand. But whereas luxuries like gold, diamonds, car, TV, anything, comforts, all those things, it is not necessary for survival. If the price decreases little bit, then we will increase the demand. Okay, so that means what, the demand is changing more because than the change in price of the commodity, like a rubber band. Okay, the demand expands or contracts. So then for those kind of commodities, it is elastic. Then the next factor that determine the elasticity is availability of close substitute. For some of the commodities, there will be substitutes available in the market, but for certain commodities there will not be any substitutes. Okay, if there are substitutes available for a particular good, like example Pepsi and Coca-Cola, the demand is more elastic. Why? Because if the price of Pepsi increases, people will stop purchasing for Pepsi, the demand contracts totally, the people will go for Coca-Cola. But if there are no substitute available for a particular commodity, whatever might be the price, we will have to purchase. If assume that there is no substitute in the market, only Pepsi is available in the market, what can we do? In summer, we all will go and consume only Pepsi, whatever might be the price. So if on the other hand, if there are no substitutes available, the demand will be inelastic or less elastic. Okay, substitutes available, the demand will be elastic. If there are no substitutes, the demand will be inelastic. Okay, now next, third one is the complementary goods. So the demand for complementary goods is a joint demand, like shoe and socks, car and fuel, etc. So the demand for one commodity depends upon the demand for another commodity. If the demand for car is elastic, the demand for fuel will also be elastic. If the demand for shoes is inelastic, the demand for socks will also be inelastic. So the demand elasticity of demand of one commodity depends upon the elasticity of demand for another commodity. Okay, that is complementary goods. The demand for complementary goods is a joint demand. Example like shoes and socks, car and fuel, etc. Hence, the elasticity of demand of one good depends on the elasticity of demand for another good. For example, if the demand for car is elastic, then the demand for fuel will also be elastic and vice versa. Okay, then multiple uses of the commodity. So if the commodity is having several uses, like milk, the demand is elastic. Why is it elastic? Because a small fall in the price, people will put milk for several uses, so the demand increases tremendously. So the demand is elastic as its demand is increasing when the price falls. So if there are multiple uses of a particular commodity, the demand is elastic. If the commodity is having only single use, like for example railway engines and all, they will have only single use, then for those kind of commodities it is inelastic. Okay, then postponement of purchases. There are certain commodities we can postpone. When will we postpone? Sometimes we will think, okay, the price is too much now, why should I buy now? Let me wait for some other time, let me purchase when the price falls down. So it is not that much necessary for us. So we require only when the price is lesser. But there are certain commodities we cannot postpone, like medicines, hospital services and all. For those kind of commodities and services, the demand is inelastic. But there are certain commodities for which we are postponing expecting the price to fall for those kind of commodities, demand is elastic. So if the commodity can be purchased at a later date like AC units, TV, etc., the demand is elastic because it is not necessary immediately. We can wait for the price to fall. But for goods like medicines, it is inelastic as the purchases cannot be postponed, isn't it? Medicines can be postponed, we cannot. So whatever might be the price, we have to purchase. Then it is inelastic. Okay. Then I think now you understood the concept clearly, what is elastic and inelastic demand. Then coming to the sixth point, proportion of income spent. Proportion of income spent means out of our total budget, total income, some of the commodities they take too much of our income. Okay, we have to spend too much of our income, but there are certain commodities or services it can very insignificant amount of our income. So if it is only taking very insignificant, very minor proportion of our income, we won't bother much because to spend that much. But if already a particular commodity is taking too much of our money income, if the price of those commodities increase, still it will take higher proportion of our income, so we will think twice whether to purchase that commodity or not. So based on that proportion of income spent, if the proportion of income spent on a particular good is very small like salt, buttons, etc., the demand will be inelastic, because even if the price rise also, how much we are going to spend for salt and buttons, it is not going to take that much of our money income, so we don't bother, we will buy the same quantity. But if the proportion of income spent on a commodity is huge like car, AC units, etc., the demand is elastic, because already in the car and AC units they are taking too much of our money income. On the top of it, if the price of the cars and AC units increase, then we will think twice, maybe we will postpone. This comes under the postponement of purchase. We will think twice, so we will let us postpone the purchase let us wait for the price to fall. Okay, so for those kind of commodities, demand is elastic. Then seventh one, period of time. So period of time is again more or less the same meaning. Some of the longer the period, the long run it is elastic. Shorter run, we don't have time for adjustment. Long run we can adjust, we can find alternative commodities and all. There are so many possibilities available, options available for us if the time period is long. So in long run it is elastic, but in the short run immediately we have to purchase. There is no time available for us to check for alternative services or commodities. Then in that case, whatever the price we will purchase, it is inelastic. Okay, so elasticity of demand depends on time period also. Longer the period, more elastic the demand for a good will be, as there are greater possibilities to discover cheaper substitutes. But on the other hand, if the time period is short, the demand tends to be inelastic. Okay, then the price level. So if the price is too high or too low, the elasticity of demand will be less. Too low, we are not bothered. Another couple of rupees rise or fall, we are not bothered. If the price is too high also, who is purchasing the high price goods, prestigious goods? The richer section of the population. They are also not bothered. Okay, so if the price is too high, say if the person is spending some 30 lakhs to purchase a car, if the price increases to another 32 lakhs, 33 lakhs or 35 lakhs, he is not going to bother, isn't it? So if the price is too high or too low, the elasticity of demand will be less. But the commodities which are moderately priced will have more elastic demand. Okay, then goods leading to addiction. Some of the commodities like alcohol, tobacco, people who are addicted, they are habituated to it. They cannot survive without that. So whatever may be the price of those commodities, they will have to consume. So those commodities will have inelastic demand. Goods that make the consumers addicted to them like alcohol or cigarettes will have inelastic demand. And finally, income group. So income group, just like price level, income, we have different categories of income groups. Higher income groups, middle and low income group. Higher income group, they are not bothered. They are the richer section, the cream section of the population. They are not bothered if the price rises also. But who is affected more because of the increase in the price? Only the middle and lower income of the richer. So they will think twice. If the price increases, they will think twice whether to purchase the commodity or not. But the richer sections of the population, they are not bothered. So higher income group, it is inelastic. For the middle and lower income group, it is elastic. So the last one, income group, The demand for those commodities which are purchased by the higher income groups will have inelastic demand as they are not much affected by price changes. But the demand for those commodities purchased generally by middle and lower income groups will be elastic as they are sensitive to price changes. Okay, so now you can see that there are so many factors affecting the elasticity of demand for a particular commodity. So this is also the important 5 marks question. Hope you have understood the entire concept of elasticity of demand. What is the meaning of elasticity of demand? What are the various types of elasticities of demand? What are the various kinds of price elasticity of demand? Okay, so even though this is only this is the 5 marks answer, I have explained all the others also. One thing, without understanding the concept of elasticity of demand, it is not possible for you to understand this answer, determinants of price elasticity of demand. That is one thing. The second thing, all those things, the concept of elasticity of demand, the concept of price, income and cross elasticity, the different kinds of price elasticity, perfectly elastic, inelastic, relatively elastic, unitary elastic, all those are very very important even for your 2 marks also, and your understanding will be better. Okay, so hope the concept is clear to all of you. If you have any doubts, please mention them in the comment box. Okay, so otherwise, if you find this video useful, please like, share and also subscribe to my YouTube channel. Okay, until my next class, take care. Bye bye.